Japan-IIASA joint seminar. Thank you very much for coming to the joint seminar Yokohama, how Japan's experience will be able to contribute to IPCC special report on climate change and cities. We appreciate your attendance. In advance of this seminar, we have some housekeeping requests for the guests. Please keep your mobile phone off or on manner mode. Please do not take calls during the session. Also, we have a translator. We gave you earpiece. Channel 1 is Japanese, channel 2 is English. Please leave the receiver before you leave the room. You can listen in the Zoom channel, Japanese or English, whichever you please. So, we would like to begin Japan-IIASA joint seminar in Yokohama, how Japan's experience will be able to contribute to the IPCC special report on climate change and cities. I'm the MC. I'm Kataoka from IJIS. Thank you very much. Opening remarks will be made by Mr. Matsuzawa Yutaka, the Vice Minister for Global Environmental Affairs, Ministry of Environment, Japan. I'm Vice Minister for Global Environment Affairs at the Ministry of Environment. Thank you very much for coming today. We appreciate your attendance. We will be hearing from the mayor in the keynote, as well as Dr. Winston Chow, IPCC SR-7 Working Group 2 co-chair, is here with us. Also, Dr. Deborah Roberts, IPCC SR-6 Working Group 2 co-chair, and all the experts, specialists are here to give us your presentation. Japan. Nationally determined contribution, 2035 60% reduction, 2040 73% reduction. We want to make sure by 2050 the GHG net zero is what we want to do. We have announced this to the United Nations last month. To realize the 1.5 degrees reduction, we have made our intent very clear to the world. For the climate change, mitigation, also adaptation, climate action is most required for both ends. The Ministry of Environment, we focus on the climate. IPCC has a special report on the climate change and cities. Through the author's contribution, we appreciate it very, very much. We have had 4 Japanese experts as part of the authors, and we're very pleased to hear about that. Japan has been supporting the IPCC activities proactively with the climate change in cities. The first authors meeting last week we hosted in Osaka. This special report is going to be part of the 7th cycle, the first of its authors meeting. We believe, therefore, it's a very important epoch-making step. In the meeting, the experts discussed, under the guidance of Dr. Chow and other experts, made their contribution from morning to evening and had a very good discussion. We heard that it was very productive. So we hope that Japan will continue to support the IPCC going forward. Also, the Ministry of Environment, IIASA, we align with them to do various joint researches, such as PM 2.5 reduction is one project, climate change is another. We were looking at the co-benefits. We had IIASA do those projects with us. We saw that there are co-benefits. And last year, we started this IPCC special report. We want to contribute about the cities. We started a project. IIASA joint project results and Japan's decarbonization, Yokohama, one of the big cities, is one of the leading cities of the world towards this zero carbon society, and also city-to-city collaboration is an area for zero carbon society program, are some of the results that we see in the IPCC hopefully can be noted. We hope that today's seminar, the joint research results, the climate change and other synergies can be shared this afternoon. Looking forward to it very, very much. And lastly, we hope for the mitigation and the city climate change and the roles of the cities. We hope that this could be a very good opportunity for people to deepen their understanding. And this concludes my opening remarks. Thank you very much. Mr. Matsuzawa, thank you very much. Dr. Takemoto, the IIASA Council Chair, Japan Committee for IIASA, will say a few words for us. Mr. Takemoto, please. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity. I am from the IIASA. I'm the chair. My name is Takemoto. As the organizer, I would like to say a few words at the opening. First of all, for this open seminar, public seminar, we're happy to have so many of you attend. Thank you so much for attending. Also, we are so pleased to have Dr. Yamanaka, who's the mayor of the city of Yokohama, to take on the big role of giving the keynote speech. And today, in the seminar today, IPCC experts and specialists, thank you for attending. Also, in having this seminar, thank you for the organizers and those who have supported to make this happen. Today's seminar is going to try to contribute to the IPCC Special Report on Climate Change and Cities. How Japan's experience can contribute to that end is what we want to deepen our understanding through this program. In Japan, earlier, Mr. Matsuzawa from the Ministry of Environment elaborated decarbonization, selected cities, and city-to-city alignment. Globally, advanced activities have been conducted. These advanced engagements, one of the success factors, are being discussed. Through these discussions, we like to accelerate the discussion as well as support from the ministry. We do have IIASA who can support us to do various projects. And through these projects, as part of that, IPCC special report process, those who are the center experts, as well as Japanese experts, also city members in Japan who are the people who actually do the groundwork and how the cities are engaged in climate change. We have an expert workshop which began this week, Monday, Tuesday, and we have 3 days of discussion. So we want to share some of the results of that discussion and further deepen our understanding this afternoon. Lastly, we hope that this discussion this afternoon can promote the climate change in cities relationship as well as more alignment with the international cities around the world. This concludes my opening remarks. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Thank you, Dr. Takemoto. Next, we would like to have Dr. Diana Urge-Forzats, the IPCC Vice Chair, to say a few words through the video message. She's also the ICLE Global Executive Committee, so we'd like to show the video from Dr. Diana Urge-Forzats.
Distinguished Dr. Yamanaka Takaharu, Mayor of Yokohama, dear Mr. Matsuzawa Yutaka, Vice Minister of Global Environmental Affairs, dear Dr. Takamoto Kazuhiko, IIASA Council Chair, dear Kazu. It's a privilege to be able to address our important seminar to discuss Yokohama's and Japanese cities' path-breaking experiences that the world, including the IPCC Special Report on Cities and Climate Change, can benefit so much from. I sincerely regret that I could no longer be with you in person. Due to my obligations, I will already be in the airplane during your meeting. A year ago, I had the privilege of being hosted by the distinguished mayor of Yokohama, also together with my colleague Winston Chow, and also had a glimpse of opportunity to witness some of Yokohama's cutting-edge initiatives and technological solutions to integrate climate advances into an effort to even better serve the city's citizens. However, during this year since our last visit, the world has changed significantly. In addition to the increasing number of conflicts worldwide, half of the world's population voted, and as a result, political priorities are in many countries shifting towards new directions, with climate and sustainability, along with other goals, sometimes taking a backseat. Against such a backdrop, the role of cities in addressing our climate challenges could not be more critical. Let me illustrate my argument with my own Japanese experiences. Each time I have been recently stepping onto the streets of Japanese cities, something felt strange. It usually takes me a moment to recognize what feels so unusual. Something I haven't sensed for a long time, usually since my last Japanese visit. And then it hits me. It's the absence of suffocating traffic jams. For example, as we were walking to our meeting on Monday morning at 8:30, the typical rush hour in Europe, the roads were plain empty, well, at least to European and North American standards. In contrast, Japanese city railway and subway stations are at this time of the day are pulsing with life. Trains depart almost by the second. Shops, restaurants are buzzing with people on the move. As a result of the wide availability of public transport and thus less private vehicle traffic, air quality maps have also just completely different color schemes than in our region. And social inclusion is high since all corners of the city are easily accessible for everyone. Yokohama is also pulsing from businesses and social life. flourishing economic activities, successful corporations, the atmosphere of innovation and modernity in harmony with the traditional, attracting recreation opportunities, community spaces where people get together. In one word, the city is among the most livable on the planet. Yokohama is the kind of city most urban dwellers are dreaming about. It embodies the very urban strategies that the scientific literature, assessed also in our IPCC reports, highlight as essential for zero carbon emission cities, while at the same time providing a better life for its citizens and businesses. Yokohama proves that a zero carbon city does not have to be about sacrifice. It's about opportunity. It's about a future that is not just necessary, but also desired. And this is exactly what the world needs now. Urban climate action that also leads to more competitive businesses, economic opportunities, livable environments, more affordable and widely accessible urban services. And this is why it's such a unique opportunity for us to be hosted by Yokohama to discuss about Japanese urban experiences and best practices after our first lead author meeting of the IPCC Special Report on Cities. Among all the challenges the world is facing, this meeting in Osaka, thanks to also the generous hospitality of the Japanese government, was an island of refuge where about 100 enthusiastic authors worked in a very collegial, positive, and constructive atmosphere and came up with a detailed plan for a very promising and inspiring report. Seeing these plans assures me that in 2027, the world will have a report that also those will not be able to wait to read, for whom it is not climate change that keeps them awake at night. And this is why it is such an exquisite opportunity for us all today to be able to engage with Yokohama's top leadership, its practitioners and city officers, Japanese researchers and urban network representatives, as well as our special report authors, to make sure the world gets the opportunity to learn from these exemplary city experiences through the science represented in our special report. We can help bring the world's dreams one step closer to urban dwellers all around the globe by us all understanding the secrets of Yokohama's intertwined success in both economic progress and sustainability together.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ardi Volsach, for your video message representing IPCC. At the beginning of this seminar, I'm sorry that I'd like to make a correction about the title of this seminar. So now we would like to move on to the next session. That is a keynote speech to be held by Dr. Yamanaka Takeharu, Mayor, City of Yokohama. And then if you refer to the IGEST event page website, you can refer to the presentation material for Dr. Yamanaka.
Can you hear me?
聞こえます。
So like she said, my slide can be downloaded from IGES homepage, okay? Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Takeharu Yamanaka, Mayor of Yokohama. It is a great pleasure to have this important presentation. And let me express my deep gratitude to Japanese Ministry of Environment, IIASA, and IIASA for organizing this event. Let me give you the snapshot of, well, oops, doesn't work. Okay. Okay, firstly, to start with, let me give you the snapshot of Yokohama's strategy toward green society. As stated in AR6, Assessment Report 6, cities account for about 70% of GHG emissions globally. In Japan, it is estimated 64 to 90% of emissions are from cities. Yokohama, one of the largest cities in Japan, is therefore responsible for leading climate actions. We have set our target to reduce GHG emissions by half by 2030. Okay. And to realize net zero by 2050 in combination with transition to circular economy. And on the way to these targets, we will host unique international expo, world-class expo named Green Expo, focusing on climate actions and green society. In developing cities' climate policies, now we have 4 pillars: empowering citizens, empowering businesses, implementing innovative tech, and taking local governments' own actions. The IPCC Assessment Report 6 states about demand side, as you know. For cities, demand side applies to citizens and local businesses. They have much potential to reduce emissions. In order to unlock their potential, local government need to incorporate the views of demand side into climate policies and lead their behavioral changes. So, how does Yokohama do this? Let me give you our 5 initiatives in this short presentation. The first example is unique net zero business district. MM21, actually where we are now. MM21 is central business district in Yokohama with about 200 hectares and 130,000 working people. It accounts for 10% of business sector's energy consumption in the city. Currently, we are working on turning whole MM21 district to 100% net zero area by year 2030. For this, we have introduced in the district such as photovoltaic on the road, floating type photovoltaic, and so on. And we are also partnering with district heating provider. Secondly, partnering with construction companies for net zero building. And thirdly, partnering with other cities for renewable energy. Additionally, and notably, we have just started to visualize the circularity of M21 district to tackle resource circulation at the district level. So let's take a look at this. We have just started a new initiative in the district to develop material flow diagram to quantitatively evaluate the inflow of materials as well as the outflow of used materials and waste. The output image is as in this slide. This is just, sample. So the point is, we quantify the whole district in close collaboration with companies there. We would expect it will lead to further actions on circular economy in the city. In general, cities are the only entities that oversees and that optimize certain districts. And the cities can connect various actors across the district through daily interactions with these actors. In Yokohama's case, we proposed to businesses in the district to achieve whole net zero as soon as possible. And in 2022, we applied for the national designation for the district to receive national governmental support. Furthermore, we will quantify circularity in this district for facilitating dialogue with local businesses. Second example is our initiatives on energy-saving buildings. We have launched measures both at individual housing and at the district level. For individual housing, Yokohama started financial support to promote people to move into newly built energy-saving houses. 1 year after starting our support, the national government started very similar support. And so Yokohama switched to a target on renovated energy-saving houses. And for district level, we have just started our endeavor to create a model for net zero residential area. It will be a combination of, firstly, introducing energy-saving housing, and secondly, developing energy-saving community hall and plaza. In general, cities can flexibly develop policies for demand-side mitigation or new ways of providing services, which will potentially, inspiring nationwide policies. In Yokohama's case, we launched financial support for newly built energy-saving housing in year 2023. The national government then started similar nationwide support from 2025, this year, after our achievement. So now we move on to new financial support for renovation of existing houses. Okay, third example is empowering nearly 4 million citizens in Yokohama. Encouraging civic actions are key to unlock the potential of demand side. Yokohama encourages civic actions by focusing on civic awareness and integrating it into daily lifestyle. Let me give you two examples, just two examples. The left picture shows vending machines that provide unsold bread at train stations. Bread is delivered from local popular bakeries. The vending machines allow commuting people to purchase bread on their way home. On the way home. In fact, bread in the lockers become sold out very quickly every time. In realizing this initiative, city consulted with bakery companies, space providers, and providers of specialized locker, so that all actors can, actively participate in. The right pick show collecting sustainable aviation fuel or SAF from cooking oil. Citizens have their own dedicated bottle like this. They can bring in used cooking oil using this bottle to collection sites like grocery stores, commercial facilities, and so on. So collected oil is transferred to SAF plant directly. So like this example, cities can promote citizens' behavioral changes in their lifestyle by policies. Okay, this is because cities are coordinators that are close to local residents. Fourth example is boosting small to medium enterprises or SMEs to climate actions. As you know, almost all companies are SMEs in most countries, right? The challenge is the number of SMEs is huge. So we need to work strategically toward SMEs behavioral changes. So let me give you our approach. Our approach comprises of 3 steps. Firstly, we started net zero declaration initiative. Each SME that is willing to reduce emissions makes a declaration in any case, okay? Secondly, we provide city support for visualizing emissions to each declared SME with detailed consultation by city. This visualization will not only encourage SME, but also influence the momentum of other SMEs in the city with similar scale and with similar type toward climate actions. Thirdly, and lastly, we promote SMEs by financial support for the installation of efficient equipment for energy saving. Surprisingly, so far, more than 3,800 SMEs in Yokohama have declared since last year, only 1 year, which correspond to actually 9% of all SMEs in our city. At first, we start from 40% last year. Now, 10%, up. Now, nearly 50% of SMEs, declared for, reducing emissions. This year, our target will be, 60%. Then eventually, our target is going to be, most SMEs in the city by year 2027. So, in general, cities can promote SMEs' behavioral changes in their business activities, through policies, by policies. So this is because cities are coordinators that are close to SMEs. So momentum for climate actions is growing Yokohama's SMEs steadily. And as the way forward, we will assist declared SMEs in estimating their GHG emissions. Fifth example is scaling and speeding up climate actions with other cities globally. As you know, collaboration always starts with finding partners. In view of this, we have hosted Asian Smart City Conference since 2012, which is matching platform to launch climate projects among Asian cities. This matchmaking has led to concrete projects on climate change in many Asian cities or organizations. Here, let me tell you one of our experience with Bangkok, Thailand, on city-to-city collaboration after the matchmaking. As described by Bangkok local press, as in this slide, I'm sorry for small character. As described by Bangkok local press, as in this slide, Yokohama has had cooperation in environmental technology to make Bangkok sustainable city. For example, we supported Bangkok to develop their first energy action plan through detailed support for several years. Last June, I was honored to be invited to attend the official ceremony in Bangkok to introduce this new plan. So like this example, we hope cities would keep learning from each other to scale up climate actions toward the common goal of net zero. In general, cities face common urban challenges, even though the characteristic of cities varies a lot, of course. In addition, cities can inspire each other for scaling up and speeding up climate actions. In Yokohama's case, we have been advancing city-to-city collaboration from matchmaking to concretely implementing with several cities in Asia. We also exchanging our plenty of experiences through international platforms such as GCOM, such as ICRE, for further actions against climate change. Okay, this is the last slide. In closing, let me draw your attention on year 2027. This year will be when IPCC special report on cities and climate change is published. In this year, we will host a world-class expo, which has been officially certified by the Bureau of International Expositions in Paris. This expo will be held between March through September in 2027 with an expected participant of 10 million people. The expo will address climate actions and provide opportunities to think together, discuss together, and act together toward a greener future. So we sincerely would like you to join this Green Expo. So please save your date and prepare to visit Yokohama in 2027, okay? And I have more to explain about my city's policy a lot. But, this is time limitation. So let me finish my presentation and thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mayor Yamanaka.
これよりパネルディスカッションの
We
方を
would
始めさせていただ
now
きたい
like
と
to
思います。
resume the panel discussion. The panel it will be a round table, so please be seated in your seats to make your presentation.
これらの進行は
The moderator will be from Mr. Togo will be the moderator. Thank you very much.
はい、ありがとうございます。すみません。皆様に後ろを向いているんですけども、私の方でモデレーションいたします。
I'll be the moderator.
ちょっと着座という形で。
I'll be seated. Sorry, I hope you don't mind.
お願いします。このラウンドテーブルですね。
This round table will be all in English.
通訳必要な方
So those who need translation service, please listen in Japanese.
So let me start. So this round table, relax, it's going to be in English. I just need to explain a bit to our audience. Really, the purpose of this particular event today is to deepen our understanding of what has been discussed at the IPCC Special Report on Cities discussion, and also reflect on what we have been discussing for the last 2 days, especially hearing a fantastic example from Yokohama and other local governments in Japan, how that could reflect possibly reflect into the IPCC special report. So as a kick-off, the start framing presentation, I want to ask Winston and also Deborah, following Winston, to give an outline of the IPCC special report on cities, where we are, to speak to the audience, whoever is here in this particular site and also online, just briefly explain what you are doing and what is the current progress of the report, to give a grasp of what we are talking about actually today. So without further ado, I would like to pass the microphone to Winston. So please.
Thank you, Togo. And I will promise to keep within the 10-minute time limit. If I do exceed it, please give me a warning or just slap me on the face. Right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm speaking, on behalf of my co-chair, Bart van den Hoek from the Netherlands. I'm Winston Chow, a professor of urban climate from Singapore Management University. And together we are the Working Group 2 co-chairs for this assessment cycle for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. I'm going to give a high-level sort of briefing on what's been done so far. I'll talk about the IPCC process for this assessment cycle. I'll talk a little bit about the framing of the special report on climate change and cities, SR-Cities. I'll leave a lot of the important details to Deborah. She'll be giving a sort of good overview on what happened in Osaka and what has been done so far. But I'll also end with a call for the audience in this room as well as online that this conversation about cities doesn't end with the SR-Cities report. It continues on with the AR7 assessment report that we are developing for 2028 and beyond, and we're looking for experts to help contribute to that, particularly here in Japan. In this so anyway, the IPCC reports, they are supposed to be neutral with respect to policy, dealing objectively with scientific, technical, and socio-economic factors. They are not literature reviews. They are not a compendium or large volume of what to do and all that. It's supposed to speak to stakeholders in government. And for the first time in this cycle for the cities report, it speaks to mayors, it speaks to practitioners, it speaks to multiple levels of government. And it's quite exciting and refreshing to have that happen in this cycle. This cycle also is rather packed from our working group in Working Group 2. Not only are we helping to lead the development of the special report that's due in 2027, we also have a full assessment for the 7th assessment cycle. We are also updating a 31-year-old document called the Adaptation Guidelines. It's now the Technical Guidelines for Impacts and Adaptation. And that all these reports will help feed the synthesis report that will be due hopefully by 2029. Apart from that, what is also very important and exciting about this SR-Cities is that based on this timeline, it will most likely be the only IPCC report that will inform and help to guide the global stocktake in 2028. So as if there's not enough pressure for the authors in this room and also for other urban practitioners, there's a lot riding on this. So it speaks to the impact that this report will have. What have we obtained so far in this SR-Cities process? Last April, there was an outline that was developed by scoping experts in Riga. In Sofia, in August of last year, the outline was approved and we could get started on filling up this skeletal framework for the cities report. It has 5 chapters. The total is about 300 pages. So it's not huge, but it's also quite but it's not small as well. But within that 300 pages, it will speak to a lot of urban audiences, and it will be pithy or direct to make sure that the information that is assessed and written is very relevant in that sense. The 5 chapters, the first chapter is on the framing of the report. Second chapter looks at the trends, challenges, and opportunities to the present day. The third chapter looks towards the action and solutions that can help with adaptation, mitigation, resilience, sustainable development. The fourth chapter looks into what factors can overcome barriers and can help accelerate this action in cities. And the 5th chapter, this is actually the most, to me, very, very exciting because it speaks to the practitioner audience from cities. In Osaka, I was telling the authors that chapter 1 starts with that question mark. Chapter 2, 3, and 4 carries on the discussion separated by either commas or semicolons. But chapter 5 is the one that ends the report with an exclamation mark. So that's the framework in a nutshell. I won't go into details about the Osaka meeting, but I would say that it's one thing to bring the world's best and brightest climate experts on cities in the room. It's difficult to get them to speak sometimes, but what really helped was the fantastic organization and the fantastic hospitality afforded to us by the government of Japan, particularly the Ministry of Environment in Japan. So thank you very much to the ministry for helping facilitate this meeting. It was very collegial, a lot of cooperation happened. And of course, we were introduced to the wonderful Expo 2025 mascot, Miyaku Miyaku. So it was the star of the show in the meeting. This might be of interest to a lot of us. It is the timeline of what the SR-Cities is supposed to be. We are about 3 months into the year. We've just completed the first lead author meeting. There will be a second lead author meeting in July, and sometime in October, a first order draft will be available for registered expert reviewers to take a look at what the author team will be developing. I would like to invite experts to register around that time in October to help the author team review and give us guidance into how we can improve that draft. So there's multiple stages of review. That will be the first time. The second time will be a second order draft that will take place after the third lead author meeting, sometime in the middle of next year. That's when governments are also invited to help with the review process. So there are opportunities in this IPCC process to help the authors make this report a really strong and impactful one. The other thing of interest is that there are in this timeline are cutoff dates for relevant literature that can help with the assessment. There's a cutoff for submitted papers and a cutoff for accepted papers taking place next year. This is important in the sense that whatever strong academic literature should take note of these cutoff dates in order to be part of the assessment process. Furthermore, there's also gray literature. We know that a lot of really relevant information comes from policy briefs, white papers, so on and so forth. That is also included as part of the IPCC assessment. So please help the author teams and help us, and the Bureau to give us the right information that can make this report a really strong one that will be in time for the approval and report acceptance by March of 2027. Do note, it's about the same time as the expo that takes place here in Yokohama. So as the mayor has said earlier today, the timing is good, and we hope that the alignment and the synergies of the SR-Cities with the Green Expo is a good sign of these reports happening together. Finally, I would like to point out a few other things related to the SR-Cities with the broader 7th assessment cycle. The co-chairs, Bart, myself, and the co-chairs of Working Groups 1 and 3, we have similar ambitions, which we hope is reflected in the SR-Cities. We want this assessment cycle to be action-oriented in terms of having strong policy-relevant information. We want the reports to be contextually based. It needs to have local knowledge that can resonate with decision makers. So it involves a bit of action on our part for outreach, for stakeholder engagement in all parts of the world. And lastly, these reports have to be relevant. It cannot be an encyclopedia. It cannot just speak to the academic community. It has to speak with governments across multiple levels. It has to speak to other stakeholders. And it requires a different way of writing, a different way of assessment. So this is a shared vision amongst the IPCC leadership for this assessment cycle. It translates itself well to the SR-Cities, but also for the other assessment reports, including the Working Group 1, 2, and 3 reports for AR7. The urban discussion will continue. There are several urban chapters in Working Group 3. There are also several important urban chapters embedded inside the Working Group 2 report. But there is one thematic chapter, which I want to flag in Chapter 18, looking into adaptation of human settlements, infrastructure, and industry systems. Those indicative bullet points are very strong in its treatment of settlements, infrastructure, cities, and my favorite one, of course, is the last bullet point, relevant updates to the SR-Cities report that will be part of this particular chapter. For people in this room, a few things of note. If you are considering to be part of the author team, and I do want to ask for forgiveness because on the top right, the deadline for author nominations is not 27th April, it's 17th April. So please, if you want to consider contributing to the AR7 report, look for the IPCC focal point or observer organization focal points, and please submit your nomination by the 17th of April, not 27th of April. Okay, I think I've reached my time, Togo. Please, I look forward to continuing this discussion here. Do follow us on our socials, and we have a working group 2 mailing list if you'd like to scan the QR code so that you can keep apprised of what we are doing over the course of this 7th assessment cycle. Thank you.
Winston, thank you so much for an overview of such a complex and very diverse activities that needs to be incorporated. Thank you so much for that explanation. I think I would like to move on to Deborah for your explanation, a little bit focused more on the city report. So Deborah, thanks.
Thanks so much, and it's a great pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. I'm going to pick up where Winston left off, because one of the key innovations of this cycle, led by Winston and the other co-chairs, has been a very purposeful choice of authors who come from the community who will use the report. So the urban practitioner community. So my background is I've worked for 30 years in local government in Africa. But at the same time, I'm now going to play a role as a coordinating lead author of the solutions chapter in this particular report. So I want to bring that perspective, the almost non-scientific perspective to the report, and look at some of the opportunities, but also the big challenges that it will face. It's just slow. So as I've said before, and probably will say again many times, for me, this is the most special of the special reports that the IPCC has been produced, and I freely admit to being biased in that regard. And the reason is simple. This is a report that will have a very human face. It'll be science, but it'll be talking about the places that we live, we work, we play, and for many people around the world are still the places that they go to when they aspire for a better quality of life for themselves and for their families. But people are not the only thing that cities concentrate. Cities concentrate power and politics and infrastructure and money. And so they really represent for us the places where the urgency of the climate change challenge and the agency of society meet. So, for example, Yokohama, a very powerful city, an influential mayor, but also very vulnerable to climate change. If you think about the impacts of sea level rise, of large-scale storm surge events. So this is the place, cities are the place where we win or lose the climate change battle in the world. Cities are the locus for action, and that's been said many times by leadership around the world. This is also a challenging report because it's the first IPCC report which will have to consider the fact that we are not going to reach the goals that were agreed by global society in Paris. There are an increasing number of scientists who believe that we will cross a level of warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius relative to pre-industrial levels. The question is, what does that mean for a city like Yokohama? What does it mean for a city like the one I come from with very large informal settlements? What does it mean for livelihoods in the interconnected rural and urban systems? And we've also got to realize that although we had a very passionate mayor here today who clearly knows his stuff, is very committed to dealing with climate change, given the pressures on cities around the world, political instability, we see that daily now, poverty, unemployment, biodiversity loss, migration, for many cities, climate change is not a priority. The question is, how do we attract their attention? How do we attract the attention of practitioners around the world? I don't think this is me. Ah, we've got it. So the way we attract them is really action, 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 because the business of practitioners is implementation. What interests us is what we need to do and how we need to do it. And as Winston said, to enable that, we do not need an encyclopedia of everything we know about cities and climate change science. What we do need to know is the most policy and practice relevant aspects of the climate change challenge and the response in cities informed by the scientific evidence. We also don't need long shopping lists of things that can be done. We need to know what of the options available to us are feasible and effective in our particular context, across different scales, across different timelines, different social, political, and institutional contexts. And as with the famous film from the US, it's a case of show me the money. How much is this all going to cost, and what are the development co-benefits and costs of inaction? But we've got to be realistic as well in terms of this report, because there's a big difference between the IPCC processes that Winston and I attended last week in Osaka, very organized, very structured, and the situation in urban environments in many places around the world. For example, the city I have worked in for 30 years, so it's quite schizophrenic. You go to these well-organized meetings, then you go home and work in informal settlements where I can't even fit my body between the houses. There's raw running sewage between my feet, and there are exposed power cables that children play with and die because they play with them. And so we have to find a way of bridging those two worlds, to use science to tell a story that links to those everyday experiences, particularly in the cities of the global south, the majority world, where the majority of urbanization is currently happening. And that brings us to a really important point, which I think was really stressed clearly by many of the government officials we met during the course of the last 2 days, is we need to be prioritizing the issue of development within the climate change response. And in fact, we shouldn't be talking about climate change responses with development co-benefits. We should be speaking about development interventions that have climate change co-benefits. We need to change the priority if we want to speak to people on the ground, particularly in the rapidly urbanizing cities of the global south, because the most important city builders of the 21st century do not live in Yokohama. They live in the informal settlements of the global south. We already have 1 billion people living in those informal settlements. UN Habitat projects that will increase to 3 billion by the middle of the century, at the same time when we're going to have to be dealing with temperature overshoot. That is a tipping point no one is speaking about. We simply do not have a toolbox to deal with that world. And so we need to think about development that not only provides us with roads, clean air, clean water, and helps us, as the mayor spoke about, bend the curve on emissions, but enables us to bend the curve on poverty, vulnerability, and inequity. We also can't be politically blind or naive. This is a very politicized world. You just got to switch on your local media outlets or international media outlets to see that. And while a lot of us focus in the climate change community on floods, droughts, and storms, cities recover far more easily from those sorts of interventions than they do from political and economic shocks. And so we need to be thinking about situations where, although there may be good science, the political priorities will in fact dominate. And so we need to understand that political economy of cities. Yokohama is very lucky. It's got a strong mayor leading the city. That's not always the case. There may be decision makers outside of the city in many instances who strongly control what happens in the city. So not only do we need the support of natural and physical science, we need the support of political sciences. And we can see that in the scientific world, the importance of thinking about the political economy is increasing. And for me, the current best example of that is some work being done by IPBES, which is the biodiversity equivalent of the IPCC. They've just recently released a transformative change assessment, which for me was a striking, no-holds-barred listing of the kind of challenges we actually face in the real world. They call out the fact that we've got to think about colonialism, that we've got to think about inequalities, that we have to think about unfit institutions, that we have to think about issues of domination. And so for me, this report sees the IPCC at a crossroads. Will we, in our assessment, be able to be as honest as this assessment has been about how strong a role politics plays now in the world of science? If we don't, I fear the IPCC will become irrelevant. there's also a radical reality out there that we have to face. You know, we've got to grapple with the fact that there's this increasing dissonance between leadership standing up and saying we must keep 1.5 alive, and the fact that scientifically we can see we're almost there already. We need to start thinking very practically at the city level about an expanded risk landscape, which includes, for example, the fact that nature-based solutions, which you could see from the Green Expo outline, is going to be a strong focus of what Yokohama talks to the world about, may not be as effective in a world that's warmed beyond 1.5. So we've got to start being pragmatic at the city level and planning for warming of more than 2 degrees. I think that's gone backwards. We've got to start planning for a world that's going to warm potentially for more than 2 degrees and think about what that means at the local level. That means we need a new plan A for cities around the world that deals with the fact that the future might not be optimal, may be very suboptimal. We may not meet the climate and biodiversity and other targets. And so how do we stop our cities becoming the world's largest stranded assets? So I go back to a point I raised initially. We've got to see that this report focuses on the what and the how. The IPCC does not need to keep drilling down into the why. We know why we've got a climate change problem. What we need more is a theory of action rather than a theory of change. We've also got to acknowledge that practice, and we've seen this today with the mayor's input, is often well ahead of what's in the scientific literature. You don't see anything of what the mayor has said currently in the literature about Yokohama. And so we need to look at literature that's broader than what we see in scientific journals in order to harness those lived experiences. But that poses a real challenge for the IPCC and authors like myself and the other 97 who are involved in writing of the report, because the literature is already doubling every IPCC assessment cycle. So if we've got to look at, for example, all the reports produced by Yokohama and the other many thousands of cities around the world, we've got a real challenge. But it is a challenge that we have to rise to, because this is a key political moment. It's a key political moment where we see nation states increasingly looking at local climate action. We've seen 3 ministerials at the last COPs. We've seen the CHAMP initiative looking to draw national governments and local governments more closely together. It's a key scientific moment when a global assessment process is going to look at the most local of actions, urbanization. It's also a key moment to consider how we work with outside partners. And in the 6th assessment cycle, many of us were involved in producing a summary for urban policymakers to get the science from the process of the assessment into city halls. And it's also a big question for the IIASA Japan research project, which drew us all here together last year and now to think about the role it can play in getting this information out. So Winston outlined the nature of the chapters and spoke to us about them being various punctuation marks. I like to think about them as a bunch of balloons, with chapter 1 through to 4 setting the context, talking to us about the why, the what, and the how. But for me, and again, I freely admit to be biased because I will work on chapter 5, the report only flies if that key chapter, which is what will summarize the solutions for the various city types and regions, allows us to pull together that complex scientific story into a really coherent story that people on the ground can relate to and inspires action. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Deborah, for that. And I think that draws quite well for our next presentation from Bas. Of course, the reason why we are here today is because of the joint research between IIASA and Ministry of Environment Japan on consideration of how the experience of Japanese cities can contribute scientifically on a discussion of cities and climate change. So I would like to ask Bas to kind of give us an outline of what you have been doing and explanation. So I'll pass it on to you. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Togo. And for those who are not familiar with IIASA, we are a global think tank research institute that is supported by around 25 member countries, of which Japan is a very important one. And with the great support of the Ministry of Environment in Japan and the city of Yokohama, we've over the past 3 days here been able to collect and discuss with lots of experts on cities, on how IIASA and this research can be contributing to the special report on cities, and also support cities in Japan with the implementation. Because one of the other main insights is that cities are the places where it really needs to happen if we want to avoid a catastrophic climate change. Let me also start by excusing my colleague Leila Niami, who actually is the one who really pulls off this work and was not able to join us here due to health reasons, but has been really working closely with the team in Japan over the past 2 years to develop cities-oriented research for the special report. And she is also one of the lead authors on the special report. So what we have done basically here in preparation for the special report is last year we looked at an assessment of the knowledge gaps to see what is actually known in the literature, and before the scoping of the special report, see where can we point out that it should really also focus on, and identified that cities are really hubs for innovation, where they're able to, many things come together. Cities are the engines, basically, where people are creative, where solutions are formed and also are implemented. But at the same time, cities are the places where challenges also come together. And they face the challenges from the impacts of climate change, but also implementing mitigation measures on cities that are the places where everything happens and where people lead their daily lives, as the mayor highlighted. Transforming such a city is a big challenge in itself. And so in this second step of this collaborative work between IIASA and the Japanese community, we focus very much on the governance of how can cities do that, and try to learn from how cities are doing that and how cities are learning each other how they can do that. And we do this by, of course, looking at the literature, preparing for the main also contributions to the cities report, but we have also done an elaborate survey with cities in Japan to actually learn from the cities here how this is going, how they are learning, and have had this important workshop over the past 2 days to really discuss this more in depth. And so what I want to do is give you some of the main insights from the survey that we have sent out and a summary of the workshop insights that we gathered with the experts and the cities that were around the table. And as this is work that is, we are really in the midst of this work, a lot of the graphics and things that I could put here on slides are mostly meant for us to have the insights and not yet in the stage where we can very well communicate those insights. And so I want to just highlight the main insights to you without necessarily showing them here on screen. But what we learned is that especially Japan has this has a very strong framework where cities are obligated to actually make plans for, on the mitigation side and both on the adaptation side, to make plans how they actually deal with climate change, to avoid to reduce the emissions and to avoid the impacts. And while many cities make those, and while many cities have a great role of science in producing those plans, we also found that only few cities seem to be actually going beyond what is regulatory needed by them, by the legislation. And so there are definitely a few front runners that go beyond and that seem to say, well, this is what we need to do, but we can do more. But the majority of cities probably can do more than they are doing at the moment. And then when we ask cities how they are developing their climate plans, whether this is mostly driven by their citizens and the business community in their city basically driving the policies that are developed, or whether this mostly comes from the top, either from the ministries or from the mayor and the city and is then imposed on the city, or whether they do this together with other cities and learn from each other, we learned basically that for many policy measures like the development of action plans, creating awareness, setting targets or subsidy schemes, it's either coming indeed from the citizens in the city or it comes top down. And there's a very large potential to actually capture for cities to collaborate more and to do things together with the neighboring cities or with other cities who are the front runners already. And we learned the same when we asked explicitly, basically, to cities, are you doing things jointly? And about half of the cities said they are learning from other cities. So that was by far most of the collaboration that was happening. Where it comes to doing things jointly on, collective purchasing together or doing joint policy making in a region or regional coordination, only a few cities indicated they were actually doing this. And so there is a very large potential to have much more impact, because if a few neighboring cities actually do the purchasing together according to the same standards, they would have much more impact than when a single city is doing that. Similarly, I think with some of the examples that the mayor highlighted here for Yokohama, if it would not be just Yokohama, but also Tokyo and other neighboring cities, the signal to the business community and to the citizens could be much stronger and consistent. And so during the workshop, we went more in depth, basically, on what actually works, what can cities show that they have done, and where things are going well, and where are the lessons that they have learned. And things that are really going well seem to be the inclusion of citizens' assemblies, involving citizens in the policy making as an increasing way to produce policy, the importance of a holistic approach, not let the climate department only care about the climate plan, but actually let all the other departments in a city contribute to it. And that also speaks to how in many cities it's not necessarily a priority, but it has to be made a priority together with development and embedded in the development in the city. And the importance of accumulating knowledge, that people gain the experience over time and then see the opportunity to harvest those options, basically, when implementing new policies, because they know of decades-long learning, basically. Cities had learned that it is really hard to prioritize climate change, indeed, and you have to really embed it together with development. And another striking insight, the policymakers said, well, often with many of the schemes, especially subsidy schemes, you start off wanting to change something in society and how people behave, but before you know, after a while, it becomes an interest in itself. And people and businesses and citizens are after the money rather than after changing their behavior. And so one has to be learning how to actually evolve subsidy schemes maybe into how they really can still change behavior also later on. The role of the business community was highlighted over and over as being something that is really important. Businesses are really willing to work often, but also are often small and deal with day-to-day challenges. And so how cities can really support them in taking action is really important. And so when it comes to learning, I think a few things to really highlight of the insights from the workshop that we had is that a lot of this knowledge in the end is tacit knowledge based on experience. And there are many city-to-city learning platforms that focus on data or information as such, but we also need to find and learn the way how we can very effective do the matchmaking between the expert in one city that needs to learn something from an expert in another city who has already done that same exercise. And this is really sharing this experience and finding who you can learn from. The interhuman learning is really important. Being a front runner city comes, is not only something that is great to do and to shine as a city, but it's also basically creating a responsibility where you can teach other cities how it can be done, and capitalizing on that more, seeing how we can allude to that altruism basically of cities to share their knowledge with others is a very important opportunity. And highlighting to cities that they can capture these joint opportunities of joint procurement. Only buy your goods from cities that have pledged, like in Yokohama here, have a net zero pledge, for example, and not only Yokohama, but also other cities, again, set joint targets or do joint policy making that really makes for city level efforts that go beyond the level of just the impact that this city can have. Those are a few of the insights that I wanted to share with you of where we stand with this research, that we are really preparing to go into the special report and hope to be able to share with you much more in depth later. Thank you.
Thank you, Bas-san. Before we go to the next presentation, I just want to ask you, Bas-san, what is the schedule? What is your final outcome? What are you going to do from now?
In very concrete terms, so we have been discussing basically how to get this into this special report, because a lot of this knowledge at the city level is very detailed and specific, and we will be working on a meeting report and the documentation of this survey in a way, actually together with you, Togo, that we can share this into as a meeting report that can be cited by the special report, and then also towards the end of this year go into scientific papers that are on the timeline that Winston highlighted to be hopefully accepted well in time to be included into the report.
Okay, I think we have a lot of work to do, but yes, I think we're all excited for that opportunity. Thank you very much for that. So I would like to pass the microphone to Ito-san, Alaska-san, about further going into depth of what Yokohama City is doing, which is of a strong interest from all of us. So, Ito-san, please.
Thank you very much. It is my great pleasure to have continued this intensive discussion with the experts who is leading the world on the cities and the climate change. So now I would like to touch upon some few more examples in addition to my mayor's speech. So I move to the next slide. So as my mayor presented, we set the 4 pillars of climate actions on the mitigation side. So first part of my presentation will focus on this mitigation part. Among the 4 pillars, one is on the right bottom side, is the pillar on the taking actions as local government, which emerged from one of the important role of the city government, that is to lead by example. So I would like to share 2 examples or 2 measures from this pillar. As the world moves forward to scale up and speed up the climate actions, we are accelerating the installation of PV panels in public facilities such as schools and sewage treatment plants. Our original target to achieve full installation of PVs was originally by 2040. But we accelerated, and now we have a new target by 2035. That means we have to double the speed or the pace of the installation of PVs. It may not be possible if the city government do this installation by ourselves. We don't do that. Instead, we call for tenders on PV installation through PPA or power purchase agreement, in which bidders will be responsible for purchase and maintenance of the panels, PV panels, and sell the generated electricity to the cities. The key here is the discussion and the communication with the potential bidders to make our tender viable, feasible, while ensuring the level playing field. This is the advantage that city has. We as the closest practitioners to local companies, we can flexibly adjust our tenders and localize individual projects to be viable and feasible. And that also leads to the flow of private finance into it. So we don't have to spare initial cost for the PV panel installation. The next example is about accelerating the introduction of LED lighting in world offices. Our original target was to convert fully to LED by 2030, and now we have a new target by 2027. In doing so, we established a dedicated group of government, local government officials across the bureaus and departments, because many of the offices are located outside of environmental bureaus. Through this group, we are sharing the latest experience and tips for tendering and procurement for the installation of the LEDs to other departments, so that they know who are about to just start the installation. So this exchange of latest experience contributes to make the whole process more efficient and integrated. Now, I thought that this is very useful within our city hall, but maybe it's useful for other cities as well. So we are having some initial discussions with some for possible sharing of experiences among cities, with some cities that I am very familiar with in Japan, not in state of Alaska yet, but we will do so eventually, hopefully. Now, in the second part, I will touch upon some adaptation measures that we are conducting in the city. Last year or last summer, we experienced the hottest summer in the history of Yokohama. And I think the citizens are very much aware and witness the impact of the climate change. Thus, the disaster risk reduction is also the center of our climate actions, especially the risks associated with flooding and very high temperature days or the heat waves. We are doing this in combination of developing and improving infrastructure, as well as promoting behavioral changes of citizens. For infrastructure to prevent flooding from rivers and inland water, as you can see, we set KPIs to implement our relevant measures. Actually, these measures are described in the city's official action plan against climate change. So we connect the climate actions with improving and maintaining infrastructure, thereby mainstreaming adaptation to the city's policies. Some quick examples of the development of the infrastructure. On the left, you can see the huge rainwater storage pipes, which are built to accommodate about 410,000 cubic meters of water. The stored rainwater, which is a temporary storage, will be pumped up when it's sunny days to the treatment facilities after the extreme weather event pass by. On the right side, the river basin area is used in many purposes, such as parks and baseball fields in usual cases, and used as a water storage area when the typhoon strikes. So it allows more effective use of public spaces. In combination with the infrastructures, we provide information to citizens on how to prepare and react to the flooding and heat waves. You can see on the left, we provide the flood hazard map, which is actually a compilation of hazard maps for flood, inland water, and landslides and others. It will inform citizens the risks of individual houses and where the safe areas are nearby their houses. In the middle, you can see the maximum flood depth is also presented as a signboard in the cities. In case of urgent situation during typhoon or heavy rain, we provide evacuation alert and information through various measures dedicated to each of the target citizens, such as through apps and signboard at designated emergency shelters. To improve our resilience to climate change, both the infrastructure and the information dissemination will be needed. And this is where the city have a vital role to play, especially for information dissemination. Again, as the closest practitioners to citizens, we can inform citizens with appropriate methods for all types of citizens that leaves no one behind, both at the usual time and at the emergency time. Last slide, to cope with the heat waves, we designated some cool share spots as places with air conditioners and chairs and benches to take a rest when going outside. Of course, for free of use. We have designated over 600 facilities within the city, and the map will guide the citizens to reach to those spots in case of extremely high temperature hours. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. I think if we allocate one day, I think Yokohama can present more examples. It will be endless session. It shows how rich the experience is accumulated in one city. So thank you very much for introducing your slides. I would like to now move on to Eric. Of course, Eric, you have been living here in Japan for many years, and you have been involved in a lot of projects. And please share us from your experience what you have been doing here in Japan. So the microphone is to you, Eric.
Okay, thank you very much, Togo. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about this idea of synergies between climate change, environment, and other concerns. And I just want to say when we talk about synergies, it really aligns well with much of the discussion about how we make connections between climate change and bigger development concerns. And I'm going to talk a lot about a project we're doing in Japan and also in Austin, Texas in the United States, as well as Paris, France, where we're trying to help cities take a look at the linkages between climate change and health. This project is funded by the Wellcome Trust, which is a UK-funded philanthropy, and it's really trying to provide tools, evidence, and experiences that will help cities leverage synergies between climate, health, environment, and related SDGs in their relevant plans. Now, the project is working in 3 Japanese cities, Kawasaki, obviously a large city of 1.5 million people, Niigata, a city of about 750,000 people, and Hachinohe, a relatively small city of about 200,000 people, as well as Austin and Paris. And with each of these cities, what we're trying to do is help the cities better visualize what the links between climate and health might look like, and then also take evidence-based actions based upon different linkages in different contexts. And so many ways what we're trying to do is take what is ostensibly a global problem and demonstrate what are the local benefits. And I think, to go back to some of the previous points, demonstrating those local benefits is really what helps drive action on the ground. And health is really important in this context. So what we've done with colleagues, especially my colleague Joe Shin at the IIASA, is we've developed a tool. It's still in a beta version right now, but basically what it's helping to do is take a look at different sectoral actions, whether that be in the industry sector, the transport sector, or in terms of lifestyle changes and awareness raising. And then these donuts right here for different climate change plans will light up if there's links between different types of environmental impacts, health impacts, and different impacted groups or societal impacts. And what we've noticed is actually cities, while they're recognizing some of these things, they're not making very systematic connections. So the idea here is to try to help them make more systematic connections. The second thing that we're trying to do is motivate evidence-based actions. And so one of the things we've done with our colleagues at Hokkaido University, and it also relates very closely to what Yokohama is doing, is to take a look at the links between extreme heat and health. And so this figure right here basically shows the number of heat strokes that are projected to come out over different time intervals out to 2030 and 2050 in Niigata. We have similar results for Kawasaki and Hachinohe as well, and it also aligns very well with some of the efforts you see in Japanese cities like Kawasaki, for instance, to promote green spaces to try to attenuate the impacts of extreme heat and health. And then the other thing that we're trying to do, this is very traditional sort of co-benefits analysis, and I want to underline here, in Japan the air is relatively clean, but some of the biggest impacts we see on the mitigation side of things are still in terms of making the air even cleaner. Okay, and so when we talk about health impacts, I believe this is for Nigata again. There's still, by realizing net zero goals, there's still significant impacts in terms of improved respiratory health, in terms of improved cardiovascular health. And once again, this is very important for the Japanese context. These impacts both on heat and health and air pollution and health are really important for senior citizens in an aging society. And once again, we need to make that really relevant to senior citizens because these are the people that are also voting and putting politicians into power. And then the last piece I want to highlight here, and we've talked about this in the past as well, but in order to make these connections between climate change, health, broader development concerns, it's also incredibly important that the people that are designing the research are talking to the people that it's going to influence. And so we've made a very strong effort, especially in context of Hachinohe, to work on a co-design process. That is to engage, in this case, the Rotary Club directly in the design of scenarios that will influence the city. And this is also important for the mayor as well. So the last thing I'd like to just talk a little bit about is the governance context. So this is stepping a little bit outside of the project, but one of the things I think we want to think about as we try to upscale some of these things is a lot of times we talk about multi-level governance where we have sort of these linear differentiations between different sectors and different levels. And I think that's very useful for thinking about, you know, how we try to integrate these results both vertically and horizontally. But I want to pull back a little bit to sort of a different model that was proposed by a famous political scientist, political economist named Elinor Ostrom. And she offered up this model, which is, I think is actually a little bit different. It's called polycentric governance. And I think one of her core insights, and we heard this from Nishimaya-san the other day, one of her core insights is sometimes while you're trying to promote cooperation and you're trying to promote coordination, sort of another model is competition. And sometimes competition can be a healthy thing, actually. I think prior to the Trump administration coming in, the Inflation Reduction Act in the US had a very strong emphasis on competition between local governments and trying to innovate. And I think what we also are seeing in Japanese context to some extent is this competition over innovation to try to achieve net zero goals in the context of broader development needs. And then once we innovate and compete, then we can coordinate and upscale. So I'll stop right there and thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Eric. And that will be all of the presentation for this session. And we would like to move on to the roundtable discussion. But before going to that discussion, I would like to ask three more experts who are sitting here, who have been also participating in the last 3 days on workshop. So I would like to ask you to just briefly introduce yourself, what you're doing, and so maybe I'll start from you, Davide.
Sure, thank you. My name is Davide Castelmagnago. I work for the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, which is the largest alliance of cities committing to climate action. We count more than 13,000 municipalities nowadays committing to climate action plans, and we have the honor to have the mayor of Yokohama as one of our board members of the alliance. Well, so of course we follow closely the process of the IPCC in producing this special report on cities and climate action, and we do that with one of our initiatives, which is called Innovate for Cities. It's an initiative that aims at collecting the knowledge from all our cities and practitioners on innovative solutions to climate change. We hosted a big conference last year in Montreal that helped also developing and updating the GRAA, which is the Global Research and Action Agenda on Cities and Climate Change, that aims at defining priorities and gaps that cities need to overcome in order to tackle climate change, and of course inputting into the IPCC process. Most of the authors and friends around this table were part of the design and implementation of that conference, which again is not only a conference, is a whole initiative that the GCOM Alliance will continue hosting and moving forwards till the design and the publication of the report and also beyond. Of course, being here in Japan with you in Yokohama this last couple of days, attending the workshop was a very precious experience for me and for the Alliance, seeing how this joint effort from the IIASA, the Ministry of Environment, and ICLEI Japan put together in this very well thought way of contributing to the IPCC report, bringing the Japanese perspectives and insights into the process is something that I will definitely bring home with me and also try to replicate and investigate in all the other regions of the globe where the GCOM is present. GCOM operates with 13 regional offices, so we have the secretariat based in Brussels, where I'm from. It is an initiative that is both financed by the European Commission on one hand and Bloomberg Philanthropies on the other hand, and I'm part of the Bloomberg Philanthropies team. We do have 13 offices globally. There's also a GCOM Japan office, to which ICLEI support and contribute in the activities. So definitely important for me to see how regionally Japan is moving towards contributing and make sure that other regions are doing at least 1/10 of what Japan is doing. That would be already great, and try to replicate the experience definitely.
Thank you very much, Davide. I would like to move on to this side of the table. Dr. Shumei, can you explain yourself, where you're from and what you are doing?
Is this working? Thank you so much, Togo. My name is Shumei Bai. I'm a professor at Australian National University, and I'm here in the capacity of coordinating lead author of the SR Special Report, Cities Special Report, on Chapter 4. Which is about facilitating and accelerating change. So the past couple of days has been really, really inspiring. In particular, today's presentation by Yokohama City Mayor. And he later on also come to me saying, I want you to know a bit more about our, approaches. And I did tell him, I really, really want to know a bit more. And this is because in our chapter, one of the focus will be really trying to put a very strong focus on learning from real world practices, and especially those that are doing some innovative and front-runner sort of activities. And we have seen a lot of them just from the mayor's presentation. For example, how some of the local initiative and policies have actually changed the national, policy, and also how they actively reach out and try to collaborate with other cities. And within our chapter, we do have one very prominent subsection is about collaboration, city-to-city collaboration, as well as city and company cross-sector kind of collaboration. So we do put quite strong emphasis on that. And we are in the process of trying to develop a framework, how we can really extract knowledge out of this really rich, collection of case studies. And we all know this is not easy, but we really, really would like to reflect some of this really rich experience into a format that actually can be cited by the special report, and I've synthesized them, published them, and then being able to be cited. So I really, really look forward to work closely with colleagues around this table and probably beyond, as well as the city government here in Japan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And of course, Dr. Shumei, you have been living here in Japan, so you have depth understanding of how the Japanese local governments operate. So I think that will be a very big asset for you to analyze and contribute to the report. Thank you so much for that. Let me move on to Team N. Please introduce yourself.
Hello. Hello, my name is Min Phương Nguyen, and at the moment I'm a postdoctoral researcher at Australian National University. So I work around the area of climate governance and sustainability transitions. So as part of my work, as part of our work at Australian National University, we really seek to explore the transformative role of city in driving climate actions with a very strong focus on Japanese cities at key case studies. And for the upcoming IPCC special report, I work in my role as a chapter scientist for chapter 4, in which I will assist the coordinating lead author and other lead authors to collect data around climate mitigation and adaptation innovation practice of city across the world. So I'm very keen to bring insight from the Japanese example and case study that I have been able to learn from the local practitioners over the past few days. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So I think I would like to move on to the panel discussion, finally. But we have maybe around 18 minutes, and I want to have at least one word from everyone, which is 8 of us. So I think this will be the first and the final question to all of you. So, but in any case, I would like to go on the opposite direction of the presentation. So maybe I would like to start from Davide. So our main focus is, what do you think were the uniqueness of the Japanese experience from what you have heard from the last 3 days? And how do you think can contribute to the process of this special report? And you just mentioned how big the GCOM network is. What do you want to kind of take back as something that you learned from here, and what you would like to do in the future?
Yeah, so I think I've already mentioned in my presentation a few minutes ago that I was really impressed by the joint approach that IPCC-IIASA and the Ministry of Environment had here in Japan on contributing, because I think it is important that both the scientific actors in a country in this case, or in a region in some others, but the scientific world joins effort with city practitioners in making clear which are the needs of cities, especially when there are processes like this one of the IPCC special report, which is again is the first one focusing on cities in history. And we've been discussing a lot how difficult it is, we're discussing these days how difficult it is to bring together those two worlds, the scientific and the data, with the city and the policymakers. So I think you're doing a very great job, and this is definitely something that as a next step from our side, the Alliance, the GCOM Alliance, we will try to mobilize, first of all, to understand if this is happening somewhere else globally throughout our regional offices. So I take these ideas and I come back asking specific questions to other regional offices, and if not, like trying to put all of you guys together in joining effort under the Innovate for Cities initiative, especially for next year, which will be crucial for the definition of the content of the report. Yeah.
Fantastic. I mean, as coming from ICLEI Japan office, of course, I would like to see Japanese experience to be contributing to the report itself. But of course, the report is not valuable if it's not covering the globe condition. So it will be interesting to work further with GCOM and how we could actually further deepen this kind of experience and duplicate in other parts of the world. Thank you so much, Davide. So, Mingfen, to you, you mentioned about the potential survey or the activities that you're thinking that you would like to contribute further. What drives you that? What do you think is the uniqueness of the Japanese experience that you're interested that you would like to bring on board?
Yeah, so there's so many things on the top of my head, but if I have to pick one thing arising from my research activity, that I would say there is a very strong lesson learned from multi-level governance collaboration. So we talk a lot about the role of cities in driving climate actions and everything, but cities are not doing that alone. And in Japan, we can see that there is a very strong enabling condition created by the national government with the very enabling legal context with a range of different regulations and policies to mandate cities to act on climate change and to develop climate mitigation and adaptation plan. And also from the presentation and through the workshop activity, I could see that the national government also provides support for individual energy saving housing, and also support for cities to engage in city-to-city collaboration initiative. So I think that kind of lesson learned from managing the relationship between national government and local government, and also to balance between national coordination and local autonomy in driving climate action is very important. So that one of the key points that I might want to take to the special report.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Dr. Shimei, so as I mentioned, you have extensive experience living in Japan and knowing what's happening in Japan. At the same time, you have extensive experience overseas as well, of course, in Australia and elsewhere. So from your perspective, what is the uniqueness of Japanese city experiences on climate change, and how do you think that could contribute in the global discussion and to the AR report?
Well, again, there are many. But from what we discussed through yesterday, the day before, and through what we've heard this morning, I think the strong leadership of mayor really stood out for me. And we know, sometimes it can be just a staff member in a city that takes really strong, leadership and be really committed and be a champion. So for me, the existence of a champion within the network of actors will become really, really important in terms of driving forward the action. So I think that probably definitely will be one of the key factors in our analytical sort of framework.
Thank you so much. And you also mentioned in the workshop about the importance of private sector and how to involve them.
Yeah, absolutely. Our recent, I think, a couple of weeks ago, it was published in Nature Sustainability, actually. We tried to understand why there are so many top emitting cities and top emitting companies. Actually, they are co-located in the same place. But if you look at those cities that are committed to net zero, they have so many companies in their cities with headquarters, but those companies haven't committed net zero. So if we can actually, reach out to the city, can reach out to the companies that with their, headquarters in their city, and then really persuade them also adopt a net zero sort of goal, then those headquarters has the decision-making potential to actually influence a huge ecosystem of, production and consumption ecosystem. So in that sense, we think it is really important for cities, and then vice versa, the companies to abreast their ambition level to the more ambitious sort of level. Then there's a huge potential to actually achieve additional mitigation. So I think our analysis showed about 67% of boost into the current mitigation sort of potential. So that's surprisingly, not many cities or companies are doing it. So I do see this as one of the key next steps that we have to really preach to the, leading cities and companies to actually do.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Now, Eric, I think you touched upon the important subject of synergies and the potential of connecting climate change agenda to different agenda that the cities already work. Tell us a bit more about that, as well as from your experience, how the experience can potentially contribute to this report that we are talking about right now.
Yeah, thanks so much, Togo. So I think connecting that to the sort of Japanese unique experience, one thing that's very helpful is to take a look at the city's climate change plans. And if you look at many of the climate change plans in Japan, they have the mitigation actions, they have the SDGs right next to them. This is a really important example for the rest of the world, so I think we need to look very closely at that. Second point I want to raise, I've already mentioned, but is this aging society. Basically Japan is at the sort of the tip of the spear of this problem, and it's going to be a demographic issue that's going to ripple throughout the rest of the world. I think Japan can give us a lot of interesting examples there. The third thing I want to highlight is smaller cities. We talk a lot about Yokohama, Tokyo, whatnot, but in smaller cities in Japan, there's two things that are happening that I've noticed. One is if you want to coordinate on different issues, it's a lot easier in a smaller city because the person who's working on climate change might sit next to the person who's working on social welfare issues, might sit next to the person who's working on jobs. If you do that in, nothing against Yokohama, but they might be in different buildings, all right? So the physical proximity makes it easier to synergize things. And then the last thing I want to highlight, this is my own sort of very personal experience, when we talk about these synergies, a lot of times we talk about things that can be very concretely measured, but one of the things that I've experienced personally in Japan is, I call it sort of societal well-being, but it's sort of a connection to something that's bigger than yourself and a connection to something that's, sort of intangible. But like when I walk outside of my house in small city Zushi, I know my neighbors now, right? And they know me, they know that I run around the block and whatnot, and I sweat too much and this type of thing. But all of those type of connections, right, are really important for trying to solve what is effectively a collective action problem. And so to try to make those connections between our climate actions and sort of societal well-being, I think Japan has lots of good examples to share there.
Thank you, Eric. That's very interesting. I think another issue to consider, I think. Thank you very much, Eric-san, for that. Now, Ito-san, so I think A lot of example was shared, and I think there's so much potential that Yokohama can present. But from your perspective, how do you think you could contribute as Yokohama to this special report on cities?
Thank you very much. I can always keep on explaining about our experience and policies for more than a week, but in preparing for this week's discussions, we had the discussions how to avoid explaining each policies, but instead to find out the key message or takeaways from our experience to the other cities, to the regions and globally. So at Mayor's presentation, tried to do that exercise, showing the general role of cities in one perspective, and to show the Yokohama's tips and what we were able to do good at it. So I think that kind of experience, exercise in extracting the key messages or takeaways could be useful for the experts in developing this cities, special report on cities. And I think that another one, I think we can show some, our examples are quite tailored to Japanese citizens' daily lives, behaviors, willingness, mindsets. So I think that is very hard to make it in the language or message itself, but it's such a way of thinking on how to utilize the usual mindset and culture of the citizens to and connect them to the actual climate actions. It could be useful to other cities. Lastly, I explained in my presentation about some challenges that I started to have with sharing the latest experiences with other cities. I just remember that MOEJ is also developing the website which compiles all the experiences, especially on the PPA for the PV panels installation. But since it's on the website, it's very nice for a starting point, and it compiles many information, but it cannot go into details. Sometimes you cannot put some information on the website, I think. So I would like to have some more detailed discussion with cities which normally cannot be publicized, but it's very important. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm particularly interested in what you have mentioned about the process of preparing for the presentation of the mayor and yourself. What was the experience like? How did that happen? Did you how was that discussion? Can you please share us that experience?
We started out with what is being asked by the Yokohama City to present. And we asked Kazu, Dr. Takemoto, what kind of question you expect for us to answer. And he gave us a lot of tough questions, 4 tough guiding questions that we had struggled for 2 or 3 weeks. But that was a good starting point to have a good question to come up with some answers for it.
But I think you did a wonderful work, and I think this process, really showed on the presentation by the mayor and yourself as well. So congratulations to that, and I think it's definitely something that every other city has to learn from. So thank you very much for that explanation. So now I would like to move on to you, Vas. So with hearing all this experience and wonderful examples, and then this, what we are doing, which is on the process, still on the progress of finishing it. But what would you see from the current experience and current progress? What is the uniqueness of Japanese experience and how that can contribute to this report?
Yeah, the uniqueness of Japan, I think for everyone who has worked with or has looked at energy data, notices how Japan sort of seems to have cracked the nut on being very energy efficient compared to other countries that have similar well-being levels and welfare levels. And so that is definitely something that the world can learn from Japan in terms of, and not only in the use of energy, but also in how you have organized the cities. The example that Diana Urgefurstad gave, that the public transport and the walkability of cities is such that you don't have the need so much basically for motorized transport, and the same on the building side. At the same time, what is then striking me when we have these discussions here these past few days actually is that even in Japan, it's still possible to do actually much more. And how people from cities are saying, yes, we have this public transport and walkability, but if I want to build bike lanes, actually it turns out to be relatively difficult. And so even though there is a big potential. And so by building bike lanes, even Japanese cities could actually work on a transformation of transport modes much more, and a reduction of the need for vehicle mobility and for public transport. In that sense, maybe public transport can be a little less crowded also. And the same on the building side, actually. It seems on the side of insulating the building envelopes and making them really so passive standard, basically, that you barely need to still heat and cool them, and I learned this morning actually from colleagues that also in many larger apartment buildings, it's up to the individual apartment to switch fuels from gas to electricity, and that installing heat pumps actually seems to be relatively difficult, whereas if it would be one system for the whole building, it would be easier to swap. And so it's fascinating to me that, if you look from the global side, Japan is unique, and it has something to teach to the world. And then you go to the country, and it's actually there's also places where Japan can also still learn from other cities. And so, making that learning work, the thing that we tried to discuss and learn during this workshop, I think really could have great benefits.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So now, with all the comments made, Deborah, I want to move to you. And I am expecting that, so this is the reason why I chose this order, expecting you to summarize in a way. So, yes, you're in the last. So Deborah, please give us your insight on what you have learned here for the last 3 days, and actually even before you've been engaged in this discussion, and your expectations and the uniqueness and what you would like to see happen from now on, as a message to maybe the participants here and also people in the online, what we should do also, please.
So I think a lot of my colleagues have spoken to the very visible aspects of Japanese society that manifest themselves in great infrastructure, proactive organization, anticipation of the report, a scientist who's a mayor. I mean, these are wonderful things. But what really struck me yesterday was we went to a local garden and were drawn into a traditional tea ceremony. We didn't spend the 5 hours that it would usually take, but what struck me was the value system that lies behind all of this, because the tea ceremony itself is centuries old. It was one of the first instances of equalizing society. People of all standings in society could come into the ceremony. And I think that cultural value in this very divided world, of where we got a focus on separation and division, of a value system that draws people in. And that's exactly what this workshop has done. It's drawn people from around the world into Japan to have this incredibly constructive conversation at a time when the world is doing exactly the reverse, I think, is the power of Japanese society. And that what really struck me yesterday is the tea bowl I was given, in fact, came from Korea and was 16th century. But what was most interesting about that bowl is that somewhere in its 500 years of its life on this earth, someone had dropped it and broken it. And it had been put together using the kintsugi technique, which uses lacquer and gold. And so, in fact, out of a situation where things were broken and divided, Japanese culture has found a way of pulling it back together and making it better than it was before. And that for me, it's this type of conversation that gives me hope, because as you can see from my presentation, I think we've got tough times ahead with climate change overshoot, the impacts, difficult political scenarios. But I think with this kind of convening, using the ability of these fora to take this information into science, to have common conversations, it can be an inspiration for the world at a really difficult time. So for me, it's that cultural message that I think we don't often talk about when we talk about graphs and numbers, which may be the inherent strength of this overall process.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Now, Winston.
Oh boy, I was mentioning offhand to Deborah that I have the most difficult task because everything that I needed to say has already been covered by everybody else, and it was very well articulated by the members of this panel. But I will end by an observation related to this workshop, similar to what Diana mentioned in a video about the rush hour traffic or lack of rush hour traffic in Japan. And it has to do with the fact that when I took up the invitation to attend this workshop, I realized it coincided with the Los Angeles Dodgers versus the Chicago Cubs playing at the Tokyo Dome for the Major League Baseball. I wanted to go and attend because it was in the evening. Then I made the mistake of checking how much the resale tickets were. It was 500,000 yen for a ticket, which I could fly from here to Los Angeles and watch a game there. But I digress. The point was, so last night I watched the game at home on TV, and there was something that was said that really speaks to the heart of the Japanese culture of excellence. Baseball was introduced from America to Japan some time back. Now, look, the best player in the world is Shohei Ohtani, a unicorn, best, could pitch and bat, like nobody else since Babe Ruth. One of the best pitchers in the world is Japanese, Yamamoto, and you won the World Baseball Classic a couple of years back. You are at the top of your game. You are leaders of that field. Similarly, the experiences, the learning of the excellence of how Japanese cities deal with climate change through a collaborative spirit. It's not the big cities, but also the small cities, like what Eric has said. The fact that you have champions in leadership, like Shemei mentioned, the Yokohama mayor, willing to engage in the process because he wants to learn and he wants to share. He knows the role that he plays is so visible. It speaks to the excellence of leadership that Japanese cities have. Again, it resonates with what Deborah has mentioned about the cultural experience. But again, looking at baseball, you've taken something that was American and you've made it your own. And with that said, the same spirit is very prevalent, or was very prevalent in this workshop. It was very prevalent during the lead author meeting that was held in Osaka. And again, it's a testament to how strong the level of excellence there is that's happening here in Japan. And I really look forward, in terms of leading the SR-Cities report and in AR7 to further engagements, further conversations with, Japanese scientists, Japanese practitioners to help make this report in the IPCC a really strong one.
Wow. Home run, yes. Thank you so much. I mean, as a Japanese, I think I'm very happy that you mentioned that. But on the other hand, we have to come back to the original and first presentation that the challenge in front of us is very difficult and very hard. Although we do have excellent example, it's still not enough. So we all need to work hard even further to speed up and collaborate, be strong, trust in ourselves and trust others, and really move forward in realizing decarbonization. And I think it's very encouraging to hear that some of the example that the Japanese local government, together with ministries and private sectors and citizens, may present some lessons that the rest of the world can also learn. And of course, I think Japanese local governments can also contribute in proactively sharing that experience. As Ito-san mentioned, what is a key lesson, key message that really hits other local governments so that they can be encouraged, they can be partner of this endeavor to become zero carbon. So I think I could conclude. Oh, I have 4 minutes. Any comments? Any further comments? Yes. I did extremely well. Thank you for all your cooperation. I think we've done a lot of talking, and I think we all understand that our real work is after going back to our offices in different countries, that we really need to kind of materialize what we have discussed. And I think we have enough schedule and things to do. But I'm personally very happy that I'm being able to be part of this process. We have very busy schedule ahead for this year and next year, but I'm sure we will go over it with a huge success in the end. So thank you very much for all the participants. Please give a strong, real applause to everyone who have contributed. Thank you very much. So I'll pass the microphone to you, Kataoka-san, please.
Thank you, 東郷さん。ありがとうございました、内田さん。そうしましたら
Thank you,
これで全てのプログラムを
Dr. Uchida. We will conclude all of the programs for today. Thank you very much for your participation in this seminar in Yokohama.